School boards are a critical element in any kind of school reform. I'm Kris Amundson, now the Director of Strategic Communications for Education Sector, but I am a former school board president, and I'm here talking with Crain, who is a former school board president in the Providence schools, about the labor management collaboration that is ongoing in Providence. Now, Kathy, you were the school board president when much of this labor management agreement began to be implemented. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what the board's role was in implementing and in supporting that strategy for school turnaround.
Sure. We had a number of schools that were identified as persistently low achieving schools in Providence, and under federal guidelines you can choose a reform model. And the one that the superintendent and the union presidents, Tom Brady at the time and Steve Smith, came up with was an EMO, an educational management organization that really was both labor and management running the show. The school board approved that model. We wanted to make sure that it went forward. We wanted to see it work. And so what we did was make sure that the people who were going to be running that organization, who were leading the charge, we tried to make sure that they had the tools necessary to implement the changes that they needed to see.
So did your role then change over time, and maybe in retrospect, do you think that your role could or should have been different?
Everything's easier to say in retrospect. I think the key issue for any district that chooses to do the labor management collaborative is communication, is to make sure that all of the parties involved have an ongoing say or an ongoing participatory place at the table, so that everyone knows what everyone else's intentions are. Everyone shares common goals and common values with respect to what a labor management collaborative would look like. And we also make sure that we have both the capacity and the tools to make it happen, which is one of the struggling points that we faced in Providence, was a lack of time and a lack of capacity at the district level.
So I'm a school board president now from small city X, and I call you up and say, Kathy, I hear that this is being considered, this is something we're thinking about in our district. What are the 3 big pieces of advice you would give to me before our district starts down that road?
Number 1 is communication. Mm-hmm. Make sure that everyone is on the same page, and everybody is ready to go in the same direction. Number 2 is be mindful of the time. It is a very complex process that takes time to hammer out, because what you're doing is really asking everybody to give a little to get a little. And so in theory, it's a lot easier than it is in practice. So I think you have to be mindful of your time. And you also, I guess, thirdly, would be make sure that you have the capacity to do this, and perhaps you replicate best practices from other organizations that have done something similar. It doesn't have to be the exact same type of labor management, but best practices from districts that you want to emulate. Make sure that you sort of have all of those in your pocket when you start, because it's a fast and furious process, and there's always a deadline. So I think that those will help you get there.
I am reminded of the great quote that in theory there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. Yes. And that clearly was the case in Providence.
It was, unfortunately, yeah. And if we could do it all over again, we would. I would like to have more time to do it, and people at the district level that were directed solely to work on that, because it is such a big, vast venture.
Mm-hmm. So moving forward in Providence, where do you see the board making a difference in terms of supporting those PLA schools?
So moving forward, I'm no longer on the board, but I think what needs to happen is that the board needs to give the administration room to make sure, room and responsibility to make sure that this goes forward at the district level the way it needs to go forward. checking in with weekly or biweekly updates on where we stand, and also sort of being supportive in the sense that you are looking for best practices that you want to replicate and bringing those to the district.
Thanks again for this very informative conversation about the critical role of school boards in promoting labor management agreements.